5D Mystery School.
Welcome back to 5D Mystery School. Let's get into it. So, what if I told you that the ancient Egypt that they spoke about in the Bible is not the same modern day Egypt that we know today? Okay, so I know that sounds far left, especially if you never heard about it, but let's look at a few things and try to open up your mind just a little bit. Okay, so this is our real identity part 1. Alright, so I'm not gonna make this like super long at all. I'm gonna make it short, but let's start here. They came before Columbus by Ivan van Sertima, the African presence in ancient America. So of course, pictured here, you have an Olmec head. And if you're asking what an Olmec head is, well, let's look. The Olmecs were the first real civilization in the Americas, beginning around 1200 BCE. They lived in the Gulf Coast of southern Mexico. Olmec society was based on agriculture and had 2 groups. The elite group lived in small urban centers. They were priests and also traded in luxury items. The commoners lived in rural areas and were primarily farmers. Around 300 BCE, the Olmecs vanished and no one knows why. Here's another Olmec head. Look at the nose. Look at the nose. Looks familiar, right? Okay, moving on. All right, so here's an Olmec structure. You can see it's pyramid in form. The same structures and stairs have been seen on many other pyramid forms. Here's another Olmec structure. You can see here pyramid structures found around the world just for reference. Alright, so you can see the Olmec civilization was the earliest Mesoamerican civilization that arose near the Gulf of Mexico. It existed for nearly 1,000 years and cast a massive influence on all subsequent Mesoamerican civilizations such as the Mayans, Toltecs, and the Aztecs. And if you were confused by the Mayans, let's give you a short description of who the Mayan people were. The Maya people are an ethno-linguistic group of indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica. The ancient Maya civilization was formed by members of this group, and today's Maya are generally descended from people who lived within the historical civilization. Today, they inhabit southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, and Honduras. Maya is a modern collective term for the peoples of the region. However, the term was not historically used by the indigenous populations themselves. So let me show you the Maya people. Alright, take a look. The Mayans. The Mayans, you can see here the description at the bottom. It says Maya, ruler, being dressed with giant animal headdress. Alright, so yes, these were the Mayan peoples. Take a good look. Yeah, they didn't teach you this in school, but these are the Mayans. And remember, the Mayans were influenced by the Olmecs. Alright, moving on. Part 3, our real identity. Let's go. So a Cherokee and Pawnee native Moor or Mers, indistinguishable from an African American. That's because it's the same thing. Alright? You could tell where we were from by our headdresses. By hers, you can tell she was from California. Alright, so here's a map of pyramids in America. It's a map of ancient pyramid civilizations and prehistoric communities. Keep this in mind. I think it's important to show you that California was once an island and there was a river that ran through it and the rest of the land, but it's since dried up. One of the groups responsible for the mounds were the Mississippians. Mississippians were the mound builders in North America. Here's Mississippian iconography. Here's an old map of America. You can see mounds pictured. It's a mound in Mississippi, some mounds in Ohio, in Kentucky, a sun temple, another in Ohio. That's important. Why is that important? You can see here the whole bottom half at once was called Florida. But of course, if you zoom in, you see that word Amari, cans again. Alright, so in the Egyptian Hieroglyphic Dictionary by E.A. Wallace Budge, you can see that Tamaru means the people of the land of the Nile flood, i.e. the Egyptians. So that's Amaru, and that's Amari. But there's no way that Egypt was here in America, right? It's worth a look, so let's continue. So you can see it says Canada in the top left corner, so it wasn't super prehistoric like the Tower of Babel, but it wasn't super recent like gypsies. But they're actually all connected. For example, here's the Egyptians Act of 1530. And it was an act passed by Parliament of England in 1531 to expel the outlandish people calling themselves Egyptians. meaning gypsies. It was done again in 1554. And you can see here the 1530 Act did not cover gypsies who were born in England or those who came to England by way of Scotland. And I'm not talking about your Google search gypsy. No disrespect. I'm talking these gypsies. Take a look. These are gypsies, indistinguishable from African Americans. But it's in our blood. At the bottom here, you can see deputations of Indians from Mississippi tribes. I mean, take a real good look. The tradition is in our blood and we embody it in many different forms. But today we're known as African Americans. And again, they call gypsies Egyptians. But that's more modern. But just hold that thought as we take it back a bit. All right, so the source of this map comes from UB News. This is an Old Testament map of ancient America. So you may hear people say, no, we're the lost tribes of Judah, no, we're Egyptians. Well, both can be true. All right, so we're gonna stop here today and pick it up next time. Like and follow for more. I love you. Peace. Welcome back to 5D Mystery School. Let's get into it. Okay, so I looked at a lot of your comments and I think it's necessary to backtrack just a bit before we continue. I just wanted to shed a little bit more light on the Black Moors and Black Aboriginals. So what I'm clearly saying is my people, who you call African Americans today, are the rightful owners of this land. We are the indigenous people to this land. We have always been here before Columbus, and when others came to this land, they had to check in with us. But of course, our land was stolen, and the history that we are taught in school is actually a false narrative. But I'm not going to cover the entire history in this video. But what I have been doing is just looking at brief periods and examples to substantiate these unfortunately unknown claims, or rather, truths. Okay, Negroes as the original Indians, proof in the Jesuit letters. The book Africans and Native Americans by Jack Forbes paint a very different picture of the history than what most of us were taught about the origins of Black people in the Western Hemisphere. And you can pause to read the rest. I'm just going to go over brief examples. Commenting from the Jesuit letter on the appearance of the Native Americans, Forbes states, that is, they are not black or white but of olive color, but the same writer remarked that the Brazilian canoemen he saw were so black that they could have been taken for sailors of the sea of Styx in hell. The term Negroes and Indios were used interchangeably to describe the natives in the journals of early missionaries who could not have possibly been referring to Africans. Alright, so here's an indigenous American, way before it was even called America. Let's just say an indigenous person. Another black indigenous person. A depiction of some more. Another brief example would be Queen Khalifa of California. And then you have the Seminoles, which is one of many tribes. Alright, so you can pause to read, but briefly, Queen Khalifa was a powerful general queen, a strategic opponent who commanded and maintained a fleet of ships while ushering in a time of peace in all surrounding lands. The robust Californian blacks were master trainers and lovers of exotic animals with developed skills. They were able to teach themselves to defend, utilizing a real force of domesticated and trained griffins and eagles and snakes and tigers and bears, along with other species native to California and Africa. These unusual creatures were trained to protect the land and its people. Queen Khalifa and the mighty empire of the California blacks, a people whose civilization and history has been lost to time and space through a deliberate destructive conspiracy of lies, secrets, and deaths perpetrated by evil invaders of ancient America. To say they came before Columbus is an understatement. They came thousands and thousands of years before. Alright, so here's some ancient America's sacred cave art. Yellow Diamond Harvest, California. Over 100,000 cave and rock art pictures, symbols, and ancient artifacts can be found in Crystal Lake, California. Now a restricted United States Army base. Go figure. Man, we can't have nothing. Okay, so our real identity, part 5. So people who don't believe the Moors have been here for a long time probably haven't done the research. Here's Jeremiah 38:12 from the 1599 Geneva Bible. And in Bed Melech, the black Moor said unto Jeremiah, put now these old rotten rags and worn under thine armholes between the cords. And Jeremiah did so. Okay, so the word mound is mentioned 28 times in the Bible. Here's some occurrences. Here's a few more occurrences. Job 28:32, and when he carried to the tombs and watch kept over the funeral mound. So mounds were used for burial. And here's an accurate depiction of what that looks like. Okay, so you may have seen these Indian burial mounds. Here's another. Here's some mounds in Chicago. The Serpent Mound in Illinois. Alright, so you get the drift. If you want to know more about this, check out this book, Return of the Ancient Ones by Empress Verdiachi. The true history uncovered of the Wichita Day Doug de Maunya Empire, the Wichita Files. Doug de Maunya implies mound builders. Here's a little map of their empire. This is a mouthful, so just pause to read. But this is talking about the illegal sale of Louisiana, which was Wichita territory, and it was acquired in the Louisiana Purchase. In the context of international law, the Wichita has established itself as a sovereign, independent nation apart from the corporate union of 1781 and the corporate United States of 1787. The land claim of the Wichita has been affirmed by Spanish and French as well as the British pursuant to Spanish land grants of 1762 and 1795. Highness Empress Verdiachi Tierra, Wichita, Washington, Tunica, Turner, Guston, L. Bay. And you wonder where the name Washington comes from. Pause to read. Empire Washington Day Doug de Maunya Mer or Moor are descendants of the Kushite Empire, the Songhai Mali Empire or Olmec, and the Ottoman Empire, Moroccan. They are also called the Choctaw or the tribe of Shabazz, the tribe of Hebrews or Israelites. Alright, so this is somebody else's interpretation, but keep in mind for the purposes of this video, Egypt is ancient America. So the Amaru, Wichita, Dogue de Maunya Moors were originally a group of priests from Egypt, also known as the Dogon, Olmecs, or Mayans. But the Olmecs or Mayans are descendants of them. You can read the rest, but I want to skip down to where it says, well, Egypt was once the capital of the world. In fact, the pharaoh gave the ancient Moabites, or the Moors, permission to settle in Morocco, which is now North Africa. Keep in mind the word Moabites. Where was Moses buried? That's going to come later. So when you hear Moors, you probably think of the Berbers from Spain. Like this Moor that looks like 50 Cent, or these people who dress up as Moors who once ruled Spain. Black ain't say funny though. Or like this Moor that assisted George Washington. That's right. You see the Moor behind him? Like for the next part. Part 6, let's get into it. Alright, so nobody knew the land better than the Moors, so they were used for navigation. Here's another depiction of that. Here's another depiction of that. But here it says American spy, because some believe that the Moors actually helped to enslave the indigenous black people that were already here. If you want me to go deeper into that, let me know. If you can see behind the horse, there's another Moor there. Alright, and those are just a few instances. But these Moors were known as the Berbers from North Africa. And if you want to know more about the Berbers, here's a good article for you to read. But these aren't the Moors that I'm referring to. Moor originally meant Westerner, not black, Negro, or colored. Moor is a Negro or a blackamoor. I shall answer that better than you can. The getting up of the Negro's belly. The Moor is with child by you, Shakespeare. As late as 1398, we find the following reference to the Moors, and the source is listed here at the bottom. 1893 Handbook of Heraldry. The heads of a Moor or blackamoor and a Saracen are wreathed about the temples with a fillet of twisted silk. Pictured here is another Moor, and you can see the source here at the bottom. The word Moor is a loose term that was used in medieval and Renaissance England to refer to the Moors, blackamoors, Negroes, Indians, Mohammedans, or Muslims, or Mahometans. Sorry. All these terms were more often than not used interchangeably, and you can read the rest. Alright, so West African Muslims were strategic allies of the Moors. Now I'm speaking about the Moors that inhabited the US. A Malian king, Abu Bakari, reached the Americas with a large fleet in 1312. And his people were the Mandinga people. And there are still traces of the Mandinga people in Brazil, Panama, Mexico, and other Central and South American countries. Alright, for some brief examples, here's a bar, Pedro Mandinga Rum in Panama City. Laguna de Mandinga in Mexico. And this is a tour to Brazil called Mandinga LLC. But there's like a lot of other examples that you can find in these locations and other locations in surrounding countries. So yes, Africans have been traveling to this country and trading for a long time. Before Columbus, that's not even his real name, before Columbus was ever heard of. And they were trading with the indigenous people that were already here. And I think it's important to point out that it would have been impossible for modern day Native Americans to have inhabited this land before the original indigenous peoples, which are people who look like me, were here. You ever notice that modern day Native Americans and Mexicans have a lot in common as far as features, like facial features, ancestry? That's because both Mexicans and Native Americans are a mix of European and Asian. Some researchers even believe Siberian, and this has been proven with empirical DNA studies. Part 7, let's get into it. All right, so I want you to pause to read this. Okay, so on September the 16th, 1810, Mexicans were urged to take up arms against the Spanish government. And it says here that Mexicans were ruled for 300 years by the Spanish. Keep this in mind. Here's an article from Science. Science shot Native Americans were a mix of Asian and European. Ancient skeleton of Siberian boy reveals some surprises. Where did the first Americans come from? Never mind, let's read. Where did the first Americans come from? Most researchers think Native American roots lie in Asia, although exactly where is not clear. But a few suggested Europe, a decidedly minority view because today's Native Americans have clear Asian ancestry. Pause to read, they're just telling you about the latest ancient DNA evidence. This is from the LA Weekly. Mexicans are Asian and other shockers about the first Americans. Pop quiz, which country controlled much of the Americas by 1700? You get 3 seconds. Spain, that's right, you guessed it. I chose this because it's just loud with facts. Mexicans overall are about 90 to 95% Native American. There is a small sprinkling of purish Caucasian population made up of Spanish, Anglo-American, Jewish, and other European races. These people very much own and run Mexico. They very rarely mix or intermarry with Native Americans. Apparently there's like a whole beef there. They are very proud and intend to assert a form of racial superiority over the natives. And you can pause to read the rest. This is from NBC News. Genetically, there's no such thing as a Mexican. Don't get mad at me, I'm just reading. Medical researchers and census takers may lump Latinos or Hispanics into one group, but a giant study of Mexican genetics shows there's no such thing. All right, here's an article by BGLA Marketplace, The Real History of Black Native Americans. Before the Spanish conquerors arrived in the 16th century, Mexico was inhabited by Native Americans who have carved out their own, often isolated kingdoms. Here's an article by Nature, Genetic Evidence for 2 Founding Populations of the Americas. However, some morphologic studies have suggested a more complex picture whereby the Northeast Asian affinities of present-day Native Americans contrast with the distinctive morphology seen in some of the earliest American skeletons, which shared traits with present-day Australians or Australasians. Here's a reconstructed face of a teenage girl who lived in Mexico 12,000 years ago. And this is from National Geographic. And this is a reconstructed face of a young woman who lived more than 11,500 years ago in a rock shelter in southeastern Brazil. So then, if the Caucasian is an invented race, how is it possible that Native Americans could be here first, if they didn't even exist before we were here? Essentially, your textbooks lied about everything else, but they told you the truth about slavery. Part 8, let's get into it. Before moving on, I just want to say that the intentions of this lecture is not to offend anybody, but just showing my people the truth, our truth. But my truth doesn't have to be your truth. If it don't fly, peace, bye-bye. Okay, so moving on. The oldest mound on this land is the Poverty Point Mound in Louisiana. And there are distinctive differences between these old prehistoric mounds and modern day Native American structures. And everywhere you dig, you just find us. The deeper you go, the more we show. Now, some of these Olmec heads they're different because some of them have Asian features, like the Shanghai Kingdom. But then you look at this Olmec head and you know the difference. Here's different variations of Olmec heads. And here's a forgotten or unknown Olmec found in Veracruz. And it says this one is dated circa 1600 BC. And one more point I want to make before moving on, just to show how much a lot of people don't know about the real history, is that Caucasians were actually slaves before, black people, or whatever you want to call us, were slaves. But more modern times would be the white indentured servants. Most were Irish, if not all were Irish. But I would just say most because you know how textbooks are. Here's more, but you can see the interracial features. Some more. You can pause to read this if you like. But they were tortured, burned alive. but it was to pay off a debt. So here's a contract to show that it was done by free will and their own accord. And one more so you can solidify this information in your mind. And this is from the Black's Law Dictionary, free white persons. You can pause to read what that means. But this was the Naturalization Act of 1870, July 14th, meaning all persons belonging to European races, then commonly counted as white, and you can read the rest, they were made citizens of the United States with this act. Okay, so ancient North America is the promised land that was mentioned in the Bible, from my perspective. Now keep in mind that everything was connected at one point and it was called Pangea. But here you don't see Mu, you don't see Lemuria, you don't see Atlantis. But that's a whole nother lecture. Alright, Pangea. Alright, so on this map, notice over there by California, it says Red Sea. Keep that in mind. Then you have Egypt over there where Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia is. And underneath that, you have the Egyptian Sea where the Gulf of Mexico is. Up top, up north, you got Assyria, you got Babylon, Mesopotamia. On the left over there by Cali, you got Lebanon, Israel. Alright, so the Mississippi is the cradle of our civilization here. The Mississippi River. It feeds all other major rivers in the US. And then those rivers feed lakes and streams. Alright, so Ptah is a creator god, an Egyptian deity. His major cult center is Memphis. Temple dedicated to Ptah, location Ramses, Memphis. And this is located in Memphis, Tennessee. Part 9, let's get into it. Divine 9. Alright, so yes, this is a statue of Ramses in front of a pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee. The symbology is loud. Random AF. Why do you suppose we have a pyramid on the back of our dollar bill? Go ahead. Think about it. I'm serious. Think about it. Because they're expecting this to just go right over your head. I mean, it is working for the most part. Anywho, information about the Upper Mississippi River system. The Upper Mississippi River extends downstream to the mouth of the Ohio River at Cairo, Illinois. One more thing about Memphis. Memphis was believed to be under the protection of the god Ptah, the patron of craftsmen. Its great temple, Hut-Kut-Ptah, meaning enclosure of the Ka-Ptah, was one of the most prominent structures of the city. This word entered ancient Greek as Egyptos, which entered Latin as Egyptus, and which developed into English as Egypt. Another remnants of Egypt, Thebes, Illinois, close to Cairo, Illinois. Alright, take a look. This is an article called The Black African Kemites, Black Ancient Egyptians. But again, for the purposes of this lecture, imagine that modern day Egypt that it spoke of is the Egypt on this sacred land. Alright, so skimming down, it says the only references to the soil in the names of ancient Egypt were the names Tamari and Tamari. Ta meaning earth, land, etc. Tamari. Where have we heard that name before? Keep that in mind. Oh yeah, that's right. Tamaricans, another remnants of Egypt. In Greek mythology, Belus was the king of Egypt and the father of Egyptus. It was claimed that Belus found a colony on the river Euphrates and appointed the priest astrologers, who the Babylonians call Chaldeans, who, like the priests of Egypt, are exempt from taxation and other service to the state. And to this day, you can find a large community of Chaldeans here in Michigan, close to Detroit. Pause to read this. I just want to point out, Belus was the son of Poseidon by Libya. He is associated with Babylon and Assyria, and his name is an echo of the Canaanite god Baal, which linguistically is synonymous with Enlil, both meaning Lord, and may be connected with Murdoch, a fertility god. And rituals are currently happening, which is why abortion rights are being messed with. It's all symbology, but moving on. And to this day, there's still a Babylon, New York City. All right, Babylon, New York. There's a Egypt, Chickasaw County, Mississippi. There's a Peoria, Illinois, like Peor. Oh, and pause to read, just in case you didn't know who Baal was. There's a Moab, Utah, like the Moabites. Mount Nebo, Utah. Mount Pisgah. Jericho, Utah. Daniel, Utah. Nephi, Utah. Ephraim, Utah. Pause to read the scripture about Baal worship. So, did Moses die in Utah? Remember the places I just read you that were in Utah? Well, pause to read this. Part 10, let's go in. Then Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho. And you can pause to read the rest and make the connections with the places I already showed you. Okay, so tribes of Judah. According to the Hebrew Bible, the tribes of Judah was one of the 12 tribes of Israel named after Judah, the son of Jacob. Judah was the first tribe to take its place in the land of Israel, occupying the southern part of the territory. Alright, so back to this. This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when I said I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab. As the Lord has said, he buried him in Moab, in the valley opposite of Beth Peor. But to this day, no one knows where his grave is. Alright, Moab, Utah. And you can see on this Old Testament map, Israel is where Utah is. Yes, this map was drawn up by a scholar, but all maps are drawn up by scholars. Stay woke. So the lost tribes of Judah came from over there. And Israelites and Moors are interchangeable in regards to historical references over the time. So again, up there where Babylon is, you have a Babylon, New York today. And again, over here with Egypt is and Egyptian sea is. Well, just to reiterate, Okay, so the mounds found here on this promised land actually predate the pyramids found in the modern day Egypt. That's not my opinion, it's a fact. And if you find that it's bothering you, you're probably suffering from a fact attack. I just made that up. And another thing, why was Napoleon campaigning in Egypt from 1798 to 1801 and simultaneously gathering his coin to get the Louisiana Purchase? I have a clue. Maybe you heard of the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:1-9. It's an origin myth meant to explain why world's people speak different languages. According to the story, a united human race speaking a single language and migrating eastward come to the land of Shinar. There they agreed to build a city and tower with its top in the sky. Yahweh, observing their city and tower, confounds their speech so that they can no longer understand each other and scatters them around the world. Here's some ancient artifacts found on this promised land. This is Hebrew. Here's another found right here in the US, and one more with Hebrew writing. How is it that the Choctaw have a story of the Tower of Babel that's been passed down? I find that interesting. Alright, so you see the Egyptian Sea is mentioned in the Bible. However, in that part of the land, it was the Persian Gulf, no Egyptian Sea, and it fed into the Euphrates, aka the Mississippi River. And here's one last thing I'll leave you with. Corn is mentioned a lot in Egypt. But what are the origins of corn? What land is corn native to?
"5D Mystery School." 5D Mystery School.